Welcome to Obsessed with Success, starring Russel Morgan.
Welcome back to Obsessed with Success. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, here with Russel Morgan. Today we're talking about the three things most law firm owners avoid: numbers, and you guessed it, more numbers. If you want to build a lasting business, financial clarity isn't optional, it's foundational. Russell, welcome back.
Kevin, as always, great to see you.
You as well. So interesting topic today. We're going to talk about numbers, some financial blind spots. So let's start there. What financial blind spots do you see most often in solo as well as small firm lawyers?
Most solos and just smaller firms are generally not equipped to deal with long-term losses. And I think this is a problem across the board. COVID was a big indicator and showed us, particularly for solos and smaller firms, that you need to have a nest egg. And this is primarily operations to continue supporting your staff, to continue making sure you can cover the expenses associated with a lot of your clients, because a lot of lawyers are getting paid at the end, right? So there are carrying costs associated with the files themselves. They have employees that they need to keep afloat. And unfortunately, a lot of people are moving month to month or quarter to quarter. And in COVID, that's why we saw such a dramatic drop in the amount of lawyers in the arena as a whole, because they were just not prepared for a situation like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that should be teaching us a lesson that your reserve and your nest egg needs to be in place, whether you're in good times or bad times. And in good times, we want to have it in place for growth, right? Because if we're doing well, we want to be able to grow exponentially. And for the same reason, we're going to need additional capital for marketing, additional capital for advertising, for training, for staffing, and for servicing. A lot of your cases have expenses. Even litigators, that are being paid on invoice basis, they're still carrying costs for that month. And if we're talking about heavy duty litigation, you could be carrying thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars per client. Now scale that up. If you have 10 carrying $2,000, $3,000 a client, you're $20,000 in the hole on a monthly basis. So a lot of solos are taking these major cases, not really understanding the financial obligations you have carrying the cases to the finish line. The other part is, even when you're on a retainer basis or you're getting paid up front, people sometimes don't have money. That's the reality of life. And if someone has to choose between their rent and their lawyer, they're going to pay their rent. Mm-hmm. So you have to be equipped and prepared that if somebody has hard times, but we're still trying to make sure that we complete the work, we finish their case, that you have that wiggle room to give them, so that even if you're covering some of their expenses today, you're able to cover some of their expenses today and get your reimbursement in the future. And look, in some matters, even if you're just recovering costs, but you're doing right by your client, that's at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. Right. You've satisfied your client, you made them happy, you've gotten the job done, most important, you've delivered quality service, you've completed your work, and they're going to tell their friends and family that, this person didn't charge me. Yes, I had to pay expenses, but ultimately they worked pro bono or free of charge. So we have to be mindful as a solo or as a smaller firm not to bite off more than we can chew, and plan ahead for good times and for bad times.
That's good advice for any business owner in any industry. I mean, that is a hard thing to, especially when the gravy train is rolling along, and you're doing great and you're putting more money into your business. Maybe you needed a new car, maybe you need, you know what I mean? So you're doing all this stuff, but then, when times get tough, like unexpected things, like something big like COVID, you're not prepared.
That's right. And look, we're in an ever-changing market. interest rates are changing. People are buying less property. Unfortunately, the economy is not great. You're constantly hearing words, talk of recession. So people really need to prep and understand that you have to be able to provide and support your clients, and you have a team that depends on you. Even if you're a smaller firm with, let's say, a handful of support staff, your support staff depends on you. Their families depend on you, as well as your clients. So we just need to make sure that when the good times are coming, that we're not just emptying out our pot and leaving it dry and hoping that more good times are coming.
Right.
We have a little bit of reserve just to make sure, whether you want to scale or you just want to make sure that if we do have a downturn, that you're covered.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times people, again, I'll say business owners in general, but for the sake of this podcast, we're talking about lawyers. Revenue and profit, they're different things, and a lot of people don't necessarily know that unless they've had some sort of experience in business. Do you, obviously, both numbers are important, but is one more important than the other as far as what you tell people that they really need to focus on?
Revenue is just your total amount that you're earning, right? How much is your business generating per month or per quarter or per year? Profit is how much are you actually left with after you've paid your overhead, your taxes, your marketing, your staff. What are you really taking home? And revenue is not as important as profit, to be frank, because you can have a $10 million business that's generating a 2% profit margin or a 5% profit margin, where your carrying costs just to stay afloat are, $9 million a year or $9.5 million a year. And the guy next to you can have, let's say, $1.5 million a year in revenue, but his cost of doing business is 500,000. So you're this Goliath, right, with your $10 million business taking home $500,000. But the guy next to you is doing $1.5 million a year, but his profit is $1 million in a year. So not only is he making twice as much money, or she's making twice as much money, but her carrying costs, the amount of work she has to generate and actually complete to make that money, is 10 times less. So I'm not concerned with vanity numbers. I don't care what your revenue is. The bottom line is your bottom line. That's your profit, right? So at the end of the day, we're concerned with our profit margin, not so much our revenue. Because if you're making, whatever you're making, and you go up and next year you double your revenue, but your profit stays the same, you should have just stayed at the level you were at last year, right?
That's good.
Because you were doing less work and making the same money.
Yep.
So always make sure that the profit justifies your revenue. Otherwise, why do the additional work unless you're doing it for the love of doing work?
Yeah, and I don't do that. I mean, no, I'm just kidding.
Listen, a lot of people love what they do. And
Yeah.
for some people, it's not necessarily about profit. And for others, revenue is important. How you look on paper, depending on the kind of company you're in and what kind of business you're in, especially if you're publicly traded or you're a larger corporation where you have to meet certain benchmarks and you have to hit certain dollar figures on a monthly or quarterly or annually basis. Revenue is important. But for regular business owners who are more concerned with profit, that's our primary concern, is how much money are we really taking home and how much is it costing us to generate that money?
How often should firms look at numbers overall?
I would say, in my opinion, you should be checking your numbers no less than, if not on a monthly, then on a quarterly basis. Monthly may be a bit premature because again, you can have a good month and then a bad month followed by, and then a great month followed after the fact. But you need to be tracking your numbers regularly. And size really matters here, no pun intended. But the reality is, if you're working with, let's say, $100,000 budget, you got to watch those numbers very carefully. Every single dollar counts. And it's a lot easier to spot where there's a problem as you're monitoring your revenue. If you're a $50 million Goliath, it's a lot more important for you to make sure you're monitoring your revenue regularly, because it's a lot easier to lose $10,000 when you're making $50 million a year, or your business generating $50 million a year. So quarterly is usually your rule of thumb, so that even if you have a bad month, good month, quarter to quarter, you're still keeping consistent at a 20% growth per annum. That is our rule of thumb. If you're in the business of growth, that you're consistently moving at a 20% per year growth annually.
Did you have any mistakes you'd like to admit that maybe your firm made early on financial wise, or any sort of like things you got wrong at the beginning?
I think, look, just like any other firm and really any business in general, there's a bit of trial and error in every department when you're starting out, especially when you're retail facing, when you're dealing with the public. And because a lot of your money is going into advertising and marketing. And just like a lot of people out there, I would say that one of those things that we struggled with was spending marketing dollars wisely and making sure that your return on investment justified your marketing spend. Just because you brought in 50 cases last month, if your marketing and your cost per case dwarfed how much you actually made at the end of the day, what's the point? You could have brought in smaller matters and not spend the money you spent bringing in 50. And I think that's an error that a lot of people make in the process. And in some cases, unfortunately, people kind of get into this swing and hope that it gets better and are just doing the same thing over and over. But you start to feel the pain when it's too late. And it comes back to your last point, Kevin, that you really got to watch your numbers. You really have to make sure that you're checking in at least on a quarterly basis. For us, it was marketing and advertising. For the next firm over, it could be operations, where they may have hired the wrong staff, or not paid enough for good people, or paid too much for not the right fit for the employee that they were looking for. But it comes back to the same point that you raised earlier, that your bottom line is the most important reason why we're here. And if we can redo it all over again, I think we would be a little bit more mindful with targeting on the clients that we want to bring in, meaning not just advertising for the sake of advertising, but
Right.
cherry picking a bit more on
targeted.
a bit more targeted on your advertising. But to really get there, you have to know what you're doing. And that's part of the problem is, especially in our industry, you're so focused on being a lawyer that you don't really have the time to be a business person.
Yeah.
So that's something that is so important, especially for solos that are operating on their own. You have to take a beat. And we have a system in our office where we take one day every 2 weeks just to sit down and reorganize. And that could be catching up on caseload for certain departments. For other departments, it's evaluation. It's how is our performance? How are our key performance indicators being met? Are we hitting our numbers? Are we not hitting our numbers? How is our spend doing? Are we over or under market, meaning over or under what we should be doing in our budget? And regardless of what size you're in, you need to have those meetings, whether you're sitting down by yourself and doing your own bookkeeping, or sitting with your team, or sitting with your departments. It's important to make sure that you're sustaining your business. And if you're in growth mode, that you have the capital necessary to scale.
Is there a certain point or some sort of clue that it's time to hire a bookkeeper or a fractional CFO or something of that nature?
I think in my opinion, it's going to be a matter of scale. And that's subjective. To someone, hiring a bookkeeper is important from the moment I can no longer be in all places.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that might mean, okay, now I have 5 large clients who I have to service on a regular basis, and I don't have the time to be the bookkeeper. But to the next person, they may be able to have the skills necessary to still be that bookkeeper for their firm and also do the work that they need to do. To be fair, you really should be getting a bookkeeper in place from day one, regardless of the size of your business, not just for yourself and your profit, but for compliance. At the end of the day, Uncle Sam is watching. We have to make sure that you're tax compliant for your business and for your clients, especially if you're in the legal industry. So regardless of the size of your business, even if it's a part-time bookkeeper, someone that you can come to when you need them, it's somebody you really should have from ground level.
What mindset shift around money do you really wish more lawyers would make?
I really wished that more lawyers understood the business of practicing law, that today's market is not the market that our prior generation grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this stems back to school. And it's the same problem in law school that it is in college. They don't teach you how to run a business. They don't teach you how to run a practice. Same reason they don't, for the most part, in most colleges, most high schools, they're not teaching you financial literacy, how to
Mm-hmm.
manage your books, right? How to
Mm-hmm.
pay your rent, what percent of your income should be held for reserves, what percent should be held for taxes. What is a budget? How do I know if I'm spending too much, or if I have some money to put away at the end of the month? And that's something that we teach, and something that you'll see on our podcast and our listeners will see on our podcast, that the business of practicing law is just as important as being a lawyer. And that's regardless of the size of your practice, because you, as a solo practitioner, still need to be able to manage your operations, still need to generate work that requires marketing, advertising, networking, however you're generating your work. You still need to have your reputation in place. Now, that could be word of mouth, or that can be publications. And you still have to deliver solid work product. And that's your services and product, are
Mm-hmm.
4 key pillars that we always talk about.
Yeah, my economics class in high school was a joke. It was a total waste of time. I mean, they didn't teach us anything worthwhile.
And that's the problem, that they kind of leave you unprepared.
Yeah.
And then they hope at some point you figure it out on your own,
Right.
and you're left to your own devices, and that's where people start making mistakes.
Yep.
And it's our job now as seasoned practitioners to pass the torch and help the next generation build a better practice from day one, not learn from their own mistakes, but come to us for coaching and guidance to help them be greater and do better than we were at their age.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Russell, very much for that information. I think that's, again, good advice for anybody who does business at all, not just for lawyers, but really appreciate your time. And thank you very much for joining us here on Obsessed with Success with Russel Morgan. To connect with Russell and the team, visit morganlegalny.com for more insights. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We got lots more great stuff coming your way. Russell, always appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Kevin, always great to be here. And to our listeners, you can get us 24/7 at 888-529-1315 or on our social media at Morgan Legal NY.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.